London, 1822. The morning mist hung over the streets of London like a veil of secrets, shrouding the mansions of Mayfair in a grey mystery that seemed to reflect Lady Arabella Thornbury's state of mind. Sitting by the window of her room at number 16, Grosvenor Square, she watched the morning bustle with the empty eyes of someone who had long ago stopped expecting anything from life. For long years since that fateful night at the Ashford Spring Ball, when Lord Christopher Hartley had publicly announced that he could not marry her. Not because there was another engagement, not because their families opposed it, but simply because, in their own words, a union without true love would be a lie I cannot sustain, either to myself or to society. His brutal honesty had been like a sharp blade piercing her chest. It would have been easier to bear if he had betrayed her, if there had been scandal or dishonor. But no. Christopher had simply looked at her with those pitying blue eyes and declared that she deserved more than he could offer. His compassion had hurt more than any cruelty. Arabella had retreated to the family's Berkshire country estate, Thornbury Manor, where the verdant hills and quiet gardens became both her refuge and her prison. At 27, she was considered a confirmed spinster, a fate she accepted with a resignation that surprised even her younger sister, Penelope. "Lady Arabella, your tea is served," announced Martha, her lady-in-waiting since childhood, entering the room with a silver tray. The middle-aged woman frowned at the sight of her mistress still in her dressing gown. "Your sister is waiting in the morning room. She says she has important news." Arabella sighed, turning away from the window. "Penelope always has urgent news. It usually involves some new gentleman she believes is my destiny." Martha allowed herself a small smile as she helped Arabella into a dark green muslin morning gown. "Your sister only cares about your happiness, my lady." "My happiness," Arabella repeated, the term sounding strange in her mouth, like a word in a foreign language she had once known but forgotten the meaning of. Penelope Thornbury, at 22, was everything Arabella no longer was, vibrant, hopeful, with eyes that sparkled when she spoke of balls and suitors. When Arabella entered the morning room, she found her sister practically bouncing in her chair, a newspaper spread out before her. "Bella! Finally! I must tell you." Penelope rose in a flurry of peach-colored skirts, her blonde curls dancing around her rosy face. "Lord Blackwood has returned from his business on the continent." Arabella poured herself tea with perfectly controlled hands. "And how does that concern me, dear sister?" "By all means." Penelope picked up the newspaper and began reading aloud. "The illustrious Duke of Blackwood, Sebastian Aldrich, returns to the capital after 3 years devoted to the affairs of his Kentish estates and the family business in France and Italy. His Grace, known for his discretion and refinement, is expected for the social season beginning this month." "Penelope," Arabella said calmly, adding sugar to her tea, "I don't see how the arrival of some duke should interest me." "Because," Penelope stepped closer, her blue eyes shining with determination, "Father received a letter from him this morning. The Duke of Blackwood has requested permission to visit him here at Thornbury Manor. He will arrive next week." Arabella nearly dropped her cup. "Here? Why would a duke visit our country estate?" "According to the letter, he's interested in our lands adjacent to his. Apparently, there's an issue regarding fishing rights on the River Kennet that runs through both properties." Penelope sat beside her sister, taking her hand. "But Bella, I've heard rumors about him. They say he's extraordinarily handsome, yet aloof. That he hasn't courted a lady in years. That something in his past has made him averse to marriage." "Then we are soulmates," Arabella replied bitterly. "Two dead hearts under one roof. What a lovely prospect." "Your heart isn't dead," Penelope insisted, squeezing her sister's hand. "Just asleep. And perhaps this mysterious duke is just the one who can awaken it." Arabella gently withdrew her hand. "Don't get your hopes up, Penelope. My heart isn't asleep. It's dead. Buried. And I've made peace with that." But as the week wore on, Arabella found herself thinking about the Duke of Blackwood more often than she cared to admit. Not with hope, she assured herself, but with curiosity. What kind of man was he? Why had he remained a bachelor, possessing both title and fortune? Was there some romantic tragedy in his past, as in her own? On the morning of the Duke's expected arrival, Arabella found herself before the mirror for the first time in years, truly caring about her appearance. Martha had noticed the subtle change and chosen a midnight blue velvet gown that highlighted the amber color of Arabella's eyes and complemented her chestnut hair, which fell in soft waves to her shoulders. "You look beautiful, my lady," Martha commented, pinning a cameo around Arabella's neck. "Just like old times." "Don't be silly, Martha," Arabella replied, but her gaze lingered on the reflection a moment too long. "It's only polite to receive a visitor properly dressed." The sound of a carriage in the circular driveway made Arabella's heart race uncomfortably. She descended the stairs with forced dignity, finding her father, Lord Edmund Thornbury, already in the foyer, nervously adjusting his cravat. "Ah, Arabella, I'm glad you came down," he said, his wrinkled face filled with relief. "The Duke of Blackwood is an important man. We need to make a good impression." "Father, we are Thornberrys," Arabella reminded him gently. "Our lineage goes back to Norman times. We don't need to impress anyone." Before Lord Edmund could respond, the butler, Hastings, opened the front doors. "His Grace, the Duke of Blackwood." The man who entered was tall, very tall, with broad shoulders beneath an impeccably tailored overcoat. Removing his hat revealed raven-black hair, slightly too long for fashion, suggesting someone unconcerned with convention. But it was when he looked up that Arabella felt the breath leave her lungs. Green eyes. Not ordinary green, but a deep, intense green, the color of ancient forests. And there was something in them, a melancholy, a hidden pain, that she recognized instantly because she saw the same thing in her own reflection every day. "Lord Thornbury," the Duke greeted with an elegant bow, his voice deep and slightly husky. "I thank you very much for welcoming me to your beautiful estate." "The pleasure is ours, Your Grace," Lord Edmund replied effusively. "May I present my eldest daughter, Lady Arabella Thornbury?" Sebastian Aldrich turned his green eyes to Arabella, and for a moment, just a moment, she saw surprise there. Not admiration, not romantic interest, but recognition. As if he saw in her something she saw in him. "Lady Arabella," he said, leaning over her hand, his lips just brushing the air above her gloved fingers. "It is an honor." "Your Grace," Arabella replied, her voice firmer than she expected. "Welcome to Thornbury Manor." When their eyes met again, something passed between them. It wasn't attraction, at least not in the conventional sense. It was understanding. Two survivors of battles of the heart, recognizing each other's scars. Afternoon tea was served in the main hall, where Penelope joined them, her usual chatter filling the potentially awkward silences. The Duke of Blackwood was polite, even attentive, but Arabella noticed that he rarely smiled, and when he did, it didn't reach his eyes. "Your estate in Kent is known for its gardens," Penelope commented, pouring the Duke more tea. "I hear you have the largest collection of antique roses in England." "My mother was passionate about roses," Sebastian replied, accepting the cup with a nod. "Before her death 6 years ago, she grew every variety she could find. I keep the gardens in her memory." "How tender," Penelope sighed. "Lady Arabella also loves gardens. She spends hours in our conservatory." Arabella shot her sister a warning look, but the Duke had already turned to her with genuine interest. "Indeed? Which plants do you prefer, Lady Arabella?" It was a simple question, but no one had asked it in years. No one had cared about her preferences, her opinions, her tastes. She was just the sad spinster of the family, to be tolerated and mercifully forgotten. "Lilies," she replied after a pause. "Particularly lilies of the valley. There's something about their fragility, the way they bloom even in the shadows, that I find comforting." Sebastian studied her for a long moment. "Flowers that thrive where others could not. Admirable choice." The conversation flowed more easily after that, moving from gardens to literature, then to music. Arabella discovered, to her surprise, that the Duke was well-read and had strong opinions on the then-fashionable Romantic poets. "Byron is talented, no doubt," Sebastian commented, "but there's a self-indulgence in his melancholy that I find excessive." "I agree," Arabella said before she could stop herself. Everyone at the table looked at her in surprise. She rarely expressed opinions so strongly. There's a difference between feeling genuine pain and making a spectacle of it for the entertainment of others. The Duke's green eyes fixed on her with new intensity. "Precisely. True pain is private, not performative." "Well," Lord Edmund interrupted, clearly uncomfortable with the philosophical turn of the conversation, "perhaps we should discuss the matter of fishing rights, Your Grace." "Certainly," Sebastian agreed, but his gaze lingered on Arabella for a moment longer before turning back to his host. As the men retreated to the office, Penelope grabbed Arabella's arm with barely contained excitement. "Did you see how he looked at you? How he really saw you?" "Don't be ridiculous," Arabella said, but her heart was pounding. "He just enjoys intelligent conversation." "It's more than that, and you know it," Penelope insisted. "There's something between you. A connection." Arabella gently pulled away, heading for the window. Outside, the March sky was heavy with clouds, promising rain. Even if there were, what would it matter? "My heart is dead, Penny. And I suspect his is too. Two broken people can't mend each other." "Maybe not," Penelope walked over, standing beside her sister. "But maybe they can learn to live again. Together." The Duke of Blackwood remained at Thornbury Manor for 3 days, resolving the issue of fishing rights with diplomatic efficiency that impressed Lord Edmund. But what truly marked those days was the growing intimacy between the Duke and Arabella. It wasn't romance, at least not overtly. It was something more subtle, more profound. Long conversations in the library about philosophy and history. Silent walks through the gardens, where words became unnecessary. Moments of shared glances that conveyed volumes. On the last night before his departure, Sebastian found Arabella alone in the conservatory. The full moon cast silvery light through the glass windows, illuminating the exotic plants and filling the air with the scent of jasmine. "Excuse me," he said, pausing in the doorway. "I didn't mean to intrude. I was told I could find you here." "It's not intrusion," Arabella replied, turning from her contemplation of a rare orchid. "This space rarely receives visitors other than myself. It's refreshing to share it." Sebastian approached, hands clasped behind his back, studying the plants with genuine interest. "Your collection is impressive. Some of these species are rare even in London's botanical gardens." "My grandfather was an amateur botanist," Arabella explained, gently touching a fern frond. "He traveled extensively before his death and brought back seeds and seedlings from all over the world. This garden was his legacy." "And you keep it alive," Sebastian observed. "There's dedication in that." "Love." "There is purpose," Arabella corrected gently. "When there is nothing else, purpose serves." The Duke turned to her, the moonlight making his face a sculpture of shadows and angles. "Lady Arabella, may I ask you an impertinent question?" "You may ask. I do not promise to answer. Why would a woman of your intelligence, beauty, and grace choose to take refuge here, far from society?" Arabella returned his gaze without wavering. "For the same reason a young, wealthy, and well-born duke remains unmarried and spends years on the continent, I suppose. Because sometimes society demands more than we are capable of giving." Sebastian smiled, a genuine smile this time, one that reached his eyes and lit them up. "Touché, milady." They remained in comfortable silence for a few moments before Arabella asked, "Will you return to London?" "Yes. There are unfinished business that can no longer be postponed." He hesitated, then added, "But I've discovered that Berkshire has its charms. Perhaps I'll return more often." "Blackwood's lands are adjacent to ours," Arabella reminded him, keeping her voice carefully neutral. "There will surely be other matters that require your attention." "Without a doubt." His green eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her pulse race. Lady Arabella, may I be frank with you? I appreciate frankness, Your Grace. I didn't come to Thornbury Manor just for the fishing rights, he admitted. My land manager could have easily taken care of that. I came because I'd heard rumors about the Thornbury family. About a lady who'd withdrawn from society after a romantic disappointment. A lady who, it was said, had sworn never to love again. Arabella felt her blood run cold. And that intrigued you? Am I an object of morbid curiosity? No, Sebastian said quickly, taking a step toward her. It intrigued me because I recognized my own story. Because 5 years ago, I too suffered a loss that made me question if I would ever be able to feel again. She stared at him, too surprised to speak. I was engaged, he continued, his voice low and strained. To Lady Catherine Fairfax. She was kind, cheerful, everything a man could wish for. But weeks before the wedding, she contracted scarlet fever. She died within days, in my arms, begging me to promise her that she would find happiness again. Your Grace, Arabella whispered, her hand involuntarily reaching for his. I am deeply sorry. Sebastian looked at her hand in his, then covered it with his other hand. I buried my heart with her, Lady Arabella. Or so I believed. I spent years traveling, working, doing anything to avoid feeling. And it worked. I became exactly what society expected, the dark duke, elegant and distant, incapable of genuine emotion. Then why come here, she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Why look for someone else equally broken? He lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her fingers gently. Because these 3 days have shown me something I thought impossible. That my heart isn't dead. Just waiting. Waiting for someone who understands, who doesn't expect me to be something I can't be. Arabella felt tears prick her eyes, but refused to let them fall. And you believe me to be that person? I believe we both deserve the chance to find out. Sebastian took a step closer, so close she could feel his heat, smell the subtle scent of sandalwood and something uniquely masculine. I'm not asking for love, Lady Arabella. I'm not promising fiery passion or eternal devotion. I'm simply asking if you would consider allowing 2 broken people to try to find some purpose together. It was the strangest, and strangely, most honest, proposal Arabella had ever heard. No empty promises, no romantic declarations. Just the raw truth. I need time, she said finally. To think. To be sure. Of course. He stepped back, freeing her hand. I'll be in London for the next few weeks, but I'll write to you, if you'll allow me. Just correspondence. No pressure, no expectations. Arabella nodded, her mind spinning. That would be acceptable. When Sebastian departed the next morning, Arabella watched his carriage disappear down the road with conflicting feelings. Part of her wanted to chase after him, to accept his strange and honest proposal immediately. Another part, the one that had been so deeply wounded 4 years earlier, urged caution. The first letter arrived 3 days later. It wasn't romantic or effusive. Sebastian wrote about London, about social obligations he found tedious, about a new book of poetry he'd bought and had thought of. It was conversation on paper, nothing more, nothing less. Arabella replied, describing the winter garden, a new species of lily that had begun to bloom, and her thoughts on the latest novel she had read. She signed formally, with esteemed affection, Lady Arabella Thornbury. The letters continued, 1 or 2 a week. Gradually, they became more personal. Sebastian wrote about his childhood, about the pressure of inheriting the dukedom too young after his father's sudden death. Arabella shared memories of her mother, who had died giving birth to Penelope, leaving her with a baby sister to help raise. I think we became adults too soon, Sebastian wrote in a letter. And we forgot how to be simply human. 6 weeks passed before he mentioned returning to Berkshire. There are matters on my lands that require personal attention, he wrote. And I confess I missed the conversations I only found at Thornbury Manor. Would it be presumptuous of me to request permission to visit again? Arabella held the letter for a long time before replying. Her heart, that organ she had sworn was dead, was pounding with something dangerously close to anticipation. Your visit would be most welcome, she wrote back, and for the first time in years, signed off with something other than cold formality, with growing friendship, Arabella. When Sebastian returned to Thornbury Manor in early May, spring was bursting with glory. The gardens were ablaze with color, the air scented with roses and lilacs. Arabella met him at the entrance, wearing a lavender muslin gown that Penelope had insisted would bring out her eyes. Your Grace, she greeted with a curtsy. Lady Arabella, he replied, and this time, when their eyes met, there was warmth there that hadn't been there before. Not passion, perhaps, but something genuine. Something real. During this visit, Lord Edmund suggested that the Duke stay for a full week, enjoying the spring weather. Sebastian readily accepted, and Arabella found herself genuinely happy with the news. They fell into a comfortable routine. Mornings were spent riding through the estates, with Penelope often accompanying as an enthusiastic chaperone. Afternoons were spent reading in the library or strolling through the gardens. Evenings involved formal dinners followed by music in the drawing room, where Arabella discovered that Sebastian played the cello with surprising skill. My mother insisted, he explained, adjusting the instrument between his knees. She said a gentleman should appreciate the arts, not just patronize them. Arabella sat at the pianoforte, her fingers finding the keys with a familiarity born of years of solitary practice. How about a Mozart sonata? They played together, and for the first time in years, Arabella felt something other than emptiness. The music flowed between them, a wordless conversation, harmonious and understanding. As the last note faded, Penelope, sitting as an observer, applauded enthusiastically. Magnificent! You two should play in the halls of London. I'm afraid that would be too much for my disposition, Arabella said with a small smile. And for mine, Sebastian agreed, his eyes meeting hers with shared understanding. It was on the 5th night of their stay that everything changed. After dinner, while Penelope and Lord Edmund played cards in the small drawing room, Sebastian invited Arabella for a moonlit stroll in the gardens. It's inappropriate, she protested weakly, though she was already reaching for her shawl. Your father can watch us from the windows, Sebastian pointed out. And after 6 weeks of correspondence, I believe we've overcome some minor conventions. They walked in silence at first, the night air scented with honeysuckle and the distant call of a nightingale. The moon, nearly full, cast enough silvery light to illuminate the way. Lady Arabella, Sebastian began, then stopped, correcting himself. Arabella. May I call you that? You may, she replied softly. And may I call you Sebastian? I wish you would. He stopped under an archway covered in climbing roses, turning to face her. These weeks, these letters, this time together have shown me something I didn't believe possible. Arabella's heart raced. Yes. That my heart wasn't dead. Just asleep, as your sister so wisely suggested. He took her hands, his thumbs tracing gentle circles over her palms. You awakened it, Arabella. Not with dramatic passion or grandiose declarations, but with understanding. With patience. With a gentleness I never expected to find again in this world. Arabella felt tears threaten, but this time she didn't hold them back. Sebastian, I don't know if I'm capable of loving again. What Christopher did, the way he publicly rejected me, destroyed something in me. I know, he said gently, wiping away a stray tear with his thumb. And I'm not asking for love, not yet. I'm asking for a chance. An opportunity to rebuild together what was broken in us. But what if we never feel that burning passion the poets speak of, she asked, her voice breaking. What if we are capable only of this, deep friendship, but nothing more? Sebastian smiled, a genuine smile that lit his stern face. Then we will have something most people spend their entire lives searching for and never find. We will have true understanding. Genuine companionship. And who knows, he leaned closer, his forehead touching hers, perhaps, in time, something more will blossom. That's the most unusual marriage proposal I've ever heard, Arabella said, a wet laugh escaping her. We are unusual people, Sebastian replied. We deserve an unusual proposal. He stepped back slightly, his green eyes serious. Arabella Thornberry, would you do me the honor of becoming my Duchess? I don't promise instant passion or eternal love. But I do promise respect, understanding, and the space to heal together. It was imperfect. It was honest. It was exactly what Arabella needed to hear. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Sebastian. I do. When he kissed her, it was gentle, almost hesitant. It wasn't the fiery kiss from the romance novels Penelope loved to read. But it was real, and in that moment, Arabella felt something awaken in her chest. Not love, not yet. But the possibility of it. And that, she discovered, was enough. The announcement of their engagement caused a sensation in London. The dark Duke of Blackwood and the reclusive Lady of Thornbury. The newspapers speculated profusely, some charitable, some less so. But Sebastian and Arabella cared little. They had each other, and that was all that mattered. Wedding preparations were kept simple at the insistence of both. No grand celebration in London, no hundreds of guests. Just an intimate ceremony in the chapel at Thornbury Manor, followed by a small banquet for family and close friends. The only shadow over Arabella's happiness came 2 weeks before the wedding, when a letter arrived addressed to her in a handwriting she immediately recognized, Christopher Hartley. With trembling hands, she opened it. Dear Arabella, it began. I heard of your engagement and feel compelled to write. Please understand that I never meant to hurt you. My refusal to proceed with our marriage was not a reflection of your lack of courage, but of my own cowardice. I see now that I made a terrible mistake. You deserved honesty from the beginning, not public humiliation. I wish you every happiness with the Duke of Blackwood. He is a fortunate man. Sincerely, Christopher. Arabella read the letter 3 times, expecting to feel something. Anger, perhaps. Or satisfaction at his change of heart. But all she felt was a distant indifference. Christopher Hartley was part of her past, a page turned in a chapter already closed. She took the letter to Sebastian that same afternoon when he came for tea. Without a word, she handed him the paper. He read it silently, his jaw clenching slightly. How do you feel? He asked as he finished, handing back the letter. Nothing, Arabella replied honestly. It's like getting news about someone I knew briefly a long time ago. He no longer has any power over me, Sebastian. His shoulders relaxed visibly. Fine. Because for a moment there I was afraid that I still harbored feelings for him. Arabella took his hand, intertwining their fingers. My heart may have been dead, but when it began to awaken, it was only for you. Sebastian pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. I do not deserve your grace, Arabella. Nor I yours, she murmured against his chest. But maybe that's what makes it perfect. The wedding day dawned bright and golden, a rare June day without a cloud in the sky. Arabella woke earlier than usual, her heart pounding with nervousness and something that felt suspiciously like happiness. Martha helped her dress, a process that took hours. The wedding dress was a simple yet elegant creation of ivory satin with delicate lace on the sleeves and neckline. There was none of the excessive ruffles and embellishments that fashion dictated, just clean lines that enhanced Arabella's graceful figure. You look radiant, my lady, Martha said, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Your mother would be so proud. Penelope entered the room in a whirl of pink silk, her bridesmaid dress billowing around her. Bella. It's almost time. And oh, you look absolutely stunning. I'm nervous, Arabella admitted, her hands shaking slightly as Martha fixed a lace veil over her hair, which was pulled back in loose curls. It's natural, Penelope assured, holding her sister's hands. But remember, it's Sebastian waiting for you downstairs. You're Sebastian, who understands you like no one else. The small Thornbury chapel was decorated simply with white lilies and sprigs of greenery. The pews held only 30 guests, close family and a few dear friends. But when Arabella entered on her father's arm, she saw only one man. Sebastian waited at the altar, dressed impeccably in black, his green eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch for a moment. And when he smiled, a genuine, complete smile, Arabella felt something inside her fundamentally change. His heart was no longer just waking up. It was alive, beating, feeling. The ceremony passed like a dream. The vicar's words, the murmured responses, the feel of Sebastian's hand holding hers as if it were the most precious thing in the world. When the moment came to exchange vows, Sebastian surprised her. "Arabella," he said, his voice low but clear enough for all to hear, "I promise you honesty always, even when the truth is hard. I promise to honor your past pain and never demand more than you can give. I promise to build a life with you where we can both be whole again. And I promise that if my heart ever forgets how to love, I will look to you and remember." Tears streamed freely down Arabella's face as she replied. "Sebastian, I promise you understanding, for I know the pain you carry. I promise patience as we both heal. I promise to build a home where you can simply be human, not a title or expectation. And I promise that even when I'm afraid, I will choose courage. Because you taught me that living again is worth the risk." When the vicar pronounced them man and wife, the kiss they shared was deeper, more passionate than that first one in the garden. And for the first time, Arabella felt not just the possibility of love, but its reality. The banquet was joyful, filled with laughter and toasts. Lord Edmund spoke movingly about seeing his daughter find happiness again. The Dowager Duchess of Blackwood, Sebastian's mother, an elegant, silver-haired woman, embraced Arabella warmly. "My son was lost," she whispered in Arabella's ear. "You found him. I am eternally grateful." As the afternoon wore on, Sebastian took Arabella for a dance. It was a waltz, and for the first time in 4 years, Arabella danced without feeling the judgmental eyes of society upon her. There was only Sebastian, his hand firm on her waist, his green eyes fixed on hers. "Regret?" he asked softly. "Not for a moment," she replied, and it was true. "You? Never." He spun her around elegantly. "Arabella, there's something I need to tell you. Try. When I asked you to marry me, I said I couldn't promise love. That we might never feel that burning passion." He paused, his eyes searching hers. "I was wrong." Arabella's heart leaped. "Sebastian. I love you," he said simply. "I don't know when it happened. Maybe it was gradual, through all those letters and conversations. Or maybe it was that first day in the conservatory when I recognized my soul mate. But I love you, Arabella. Completely. Irrevocably." The tears came again, but this time they were of pure joy. "I love you too," she whispered. "I thought my heart was dead, but you brought it back to life." Sebastian stopped dancing right there, in the middle of the ballroom, in front of all the guests, and kissed her deeply. There was applause and some amused laughter, but none of them noticed. They were lost in each other, two hearts that had been dead, now beating in perfect synchrony. Later that evening, as they set off in their carriage for the Blackwood estate in Kent, where they would spend their honeymoon, Arabella looked out the window at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "What are you thinking about?" Sebastian asked, his arm around her, keeping her warm against the night chill. "I'm thinking about how strange life is," she replied, leaning against him. "Months ago, I was convinced I would spend the rest of my days alone, with my heart buried along with my hopes. And now. She turned to look at him, her face illuminated only by the moonlight streaming through the carriage window. "And now I feel truly alive for the first time in years. As if everything I've been through, all the pain and loneliness, had a purpose. It led me to you. Sebastian kissed her forehead tenderly. I feel the same way. Catherine always asked me to find happiness again. It took 5 years, but I finally fulfilled my promise to her. And I found so much more than happiness. I found peace. Purpose. Love. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the gentle rocking of the carriage and the rhythmic clopping of the horses' hooves creating an atmosphere of intimacy. Arabella felt safer than she ever had, nestled in her husband's arms. Sebastian, she said eventually, can I ask you a question? Anything. When did you know you loved me? You said you're not sure when it happened, but there must have been some moment when you knew. He considered for a long moment. Do you remember that afternoon in the library when we discussed Kant's philosophy? Yes. You argued that pure reason was insufficient without empirical experience. And you challenged me brilliantly. Sebastian smiled into the darkness. In that moment, when your eyes lit with intellectual passion, when you forgot about being the reserved, sad lady and simply were yourself, completely alive and engaged, I knew. It may not have been love yet, but it was the moment I knew I could love again. And that it would be you. Arabella felt her heart overflow. For me, it was when you played the cello. There was such emotion in your music, such vulnerability. I saw the man behind the title, and he was magnificent. We're being extraordinarily sentimental, Sebastian observed humorously. We're newlyweds, Arabella replied, laughing softly. I suppose that's allowed. The Blackwood estate in Kent was even more impressive than Arabella had imagined. The mansion was vast, built of pale stone that glowed golden in the late afternoon sun when they arrived. But what truly captured her attention were the gardens. Acres and acres of meticulously maintained gardens, just as Penelope had described. And in the center of it all, her late mother-in-law's rose garden, still in full bloom, a sea of color and perfume that took Arabella's breath away. It's stunning, she whispered as Sebastian helped her down from the carriage. My mother spent hours here, Sebastian said, his voice thick with memory. She said roses were like people. Each unique, each requiring different care, but all capable of extraordinary beauty if loved properly. Arabella laced her fingers with his. I wish I had met her. She would have loved you, Sebastian assured. Just like I do. The first days at Blackwood were a revelation. Far from the eyes of society, far from expectations and conventions, Sebastian and Arabella could simply be themselves. They spent mornings exploring the gardens, afternoons in Blackwood's extensive library, and nights discovering each other. There was no more hesitation between them, no trace of the fear they had both carried for so long. When they made love, it was with tenderness and passion intertwined, each touch an affirmation that they were alive, whole, capable of feeling everything. One afternoon, a week after her arrival, Arabella found Sebastian in the rose garden, standing before a particular bush of white roses. There was something in his posture that spoke of sadness. Sebastian, she approached softly. Are you okay? He turned to her, and she saw unshed tears in his eyes. These were Catherine's favorite roses. She planted them just before she fell ill. Arabella could have felt jealousy, but she didn't. Instead, she felt deep compassion. Do you want to talk about her? Do you think it would be inappropriate? Talking about my late fiancé with my wife? I think it would be healthy, Arabella replied gently, taking his hand. She was an important part of your life, Sebastian. I'm not asking you to forget her or pretend she never existed. They sat together on a stone bench, surrounded by the roses Catherine had loved. And there, in the afternoon sun, Sebastian spoke. About how vibrant and full of life Catherine had been. About how the illness had taken her so quickly he barely had time to comprehend. About the guilt he had carried, wondering if he could have done anything differently. I felt like my heart had died with her, he confessed. And for 5 years, nothing changed that. Until you. Arabella rested her head on his shoulder. I haven't replaced her, Sebastian. And I don't want to. The love you felt for Catherine was real and beautiful. But the love you feel for me is different, built on our own experiences, our own journey. How did you become so wise? He asked, kissing her hair. Suffering, she replied simply. It teaches us things no formal education could. As they walked back to the house hand in hand, Arabella felt a deep peace. There were no shadows between them now, no unspoken secrets. They were completely honest with each other, and in that honesty, they found true freedom. The weeks at Blackwood passed all too quickly. June turned into July, and it was time to return to London to fulfill certain social obligations. Arabella confessed to being nervous about facing society again, this time as the Duchess of Blackwood. They'll all be watching, she said on the morning of her departure, as Martha packed her belongings. Judging. Waiting for me to fail. Sebastian, leaning elegantly against the doorframe, smiled. Let them look. Let them judge. You are the Duchess of Blackwood now, Arabella. And I will be by your side every moment. London in July was stiflingly hot, the city filled with coal smoke and unpleasant smells. But the Blackwood residence in Grosvenor Square was cool and elegant, and the staff welcomed their new Duchess with warm approval. The first major test came 2 days after her arrival. Lady Pemberton, one of London's most influential hostesses, had sent an invitation to a summer ball. It was, everyone knew, a test. If the new Duchess of Blackwood attended and was accepted, her position in society would be assured. You don't have to go if you don't want to, Sebastian said as they examined the invitation over breakfast. I can send our apologies. Arabella considered for a long moment. The old Arabella, the one who had hidden away at Thornbury Manor for 4 years, would have refused immediately. But she was no longer that woman. No, she said finally, lifting her chin. I will. I will face society. And I will show everyone that Lady Arabella Thornbury is no longer dead. She has been reborn as the Duchess of Blackwood. The pride in Sebastian's eyes was gratifying. That's my Duchess. On the night of the ball, Arabella dressed with care. She chose an emerald green silk gown that perfectly complemented Sebastian's eyes and enhanced her own. Her hair was styled in an elegant style that exposed her neck, where she wore an emerald necklace that had belonged to Sebastian's mother. You look magnificent, Sebastian said as she descended the stairs. He himself was impeccable in black and white, every inch the powerful Duke. I'm terrified, she admitted quietly. I know. He offered his arm. But remember, you're not alone. You never will be again. Lady Pemberton's ballroom was packed when they arrived. The moment they were announced, His Grace, the Duke of Blackwood, and Her Grace, the Duchess of Blackwood, the conversation ceased. All eyes turned to them. Arabella felt the old fear try to overwhelm her. But then Sebastian pressed her hand into the crook of his arm, a tiny but comforting gesture. She took a deep breath and walked into the hall with her head held high. Lady Pemberton hurried to greet them, her expression revealing genuine approval. Your Grace, Duchess, she said warmly, what a pleasure to have you here. Your beauty and grace are even more impressive than the rumors suggested. It was a public endorsement, and Arabella felt the tension in the room visibly ease. If Lady Pemberton approved of the new Duchess, others would follow. The evening passed in a whirlwind of introductions and polite conversation. Arabella discovered that being Duchess of Blackwood bestowed upon her a kind of armor that Lady Arabella Thornbury had never possessed. People treated her with respect and deference. It was during the third waltz that she saw him, Christopher Hartley, standing at the edge of the dance floor, watching her. Her heart didn't leap. Her hands didn't tremble. She simply noticed his presence with the same indifference she would any other stranger. He's here, Sebastian murmured, having followed her gaze. I know, Arabella replied calmly. It doesn't matter. Do you want me to make him leave? No. She looked at her husband, love shining in her eyes. Let him stay. Let him see how happy I am. Let him understand that his power over me died long ago. When the waltz ended, Christopher approached. Arabella could see nervousness in his eyes, perhaps even regret. "Lady, pardon me, Duchess Blackwood," he greeted with a deep bow. "May I have a moment of your time?" Sebastian tensed beside her, but Arabella remained calm. "Mr. Hartley." "Of course." Christopher shot a nervous glance at Sebastian, who made no move to give them privacy. "I wanted to personally express my congratulations on your marriage. And also, ask your forgiveness for my behavior 4 years ago." Arabella studied the man who had once broken her heart. He looked older, more tired. There were lines of worry around his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Your apology is accepted," she said graciously. "The past is the past, Mr. Hartley. We've both moved on with our lives." "You were always too generous," Christopher said softly. "I was a fool." "You were honest," Arabella corrected gently. "And though your honesty hurt at the time, it freed me to find my true happiness." She glanced at Sebastian, who was watching the exchange with a carefully neutral expression. "I have found a man who loves me for who I am, not in spite of who I am. For that, Mr. Hartley, I must thank you." Christopher paled slightly, but nodded with dignity. "Then I wish you every happiness, Duchess. You deserve nothing less." He bowed again and withdrew. "That was extraordinarily magnanimous," Sebastian commented when they were alone again. "It was liberating," Arabella replied. "For 4 years, I allowed that man and that moment to define my life. No longer. My story doesn't begin or end with Christopher Hartley. It continues with me, with you, with our future together." Sebastian pulled her into his arms right there, in the middle of the ballroom, and kissed her deeply. There were some scandalized murmurs, but far more romantic sighs. "I love you," he said when they parted. "More than I thought it was possible to love anyone." "And I love you," Arabella replied, her heart so full it seemed impossible to contain her joy. "You have brought my heart back to life." The following months were filled with pure bliss. Arabella blossomed in her role as Duchess of Blackwood. She and Sebastian divided their time between London, where they entertained and fulfilled social obligations, and Blackwood Hall, where they could simply be a loving couple. In the fall, Arabella discovered she was expecting a child. The news filled Sebastian with almost childlike joy. He insisted that she rest excessively, which Arabella found alternately touching and exasperating. "Sebastian, I'm pregnant, not an invalid," she protested when he tried to stop her from taking her daily walk through the gardens. "I know that," he said, looking slightly embarrassed. "It's just. I lost Catherine. I can't lose you too." Arabella softened immediately, taking his face in her hands. "You will not lose me. I am strong, and our child will be strong. But I need you to trust me, my body, our luck." He nodded, kissing her palm. "You're right. Forgive my overcaution." "You're forgiven," she said with a smile. "But you're coming with me on the walk." As they walked through the autumn gardens, golden leaves falling around them, Arabella reflected on how far they had come. Less than a year ago, she was a broken woman, hiding from the world, convinced her heart was dead. Now she was a beloved wife, a future mother, a woman who looked to the future with hope rather than fear. "What are you thinking about?" Sebastian asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "In miracles," she replied. "In how sometimes the most beautiful things in life come from the most unexpected places. In how a heart can be dead and yet learn to beat again." Sebastian stopped, turning her to face him. The golden autumn light gilded her dark hair and made her green eyes sparkle. "It wasn't a miracle, Arabella. It was a choice. You chose to try again. You chose to risk your heart once more. And that courage, that willingness to live despite fear, is more admirable than any miracle." Tears, a common occurrence since pregnancy, filled Arabella's eyes. "We chose, Sebastian. Both of us. We chose to heal. We chose love. We chose life. He kissed her then, softly, tenderly, as if she were the most precious thing in the world. And in that moment, surrounded by the colors of autumn, with the promise of new life blossoming between them, Arabella knew with absolute certainty that her heart was not only alive, it was whole. Winter arrived, bringing snow that transformed Blackwood Hall into something out of a fairy tale. Arabella, now visibly pregnant, spent her days reading by the fire, needlepointing for the nursery, and writing letters to Penelope, who was engaged to a respectable young gentleman. One January afternoon, as snow fell gently outside, Arabella sat in the conservatory Sebastian had built especially for her. It was smaller than the one at Thornbury Manor, but perfectly adequate, filled with lilies and other plants she loved. Sebastian found her there, sitting in a comfortable chair, one hand on her rounded belly, a forgotten book on her lap. "Comfortable?" he asked, sitting on the arm of his chair. "Perfectly," she smiled. "Your son is particularly active today. I believe he will be a strong boy like his father." "Or a strong girl like her mother," Sebastian suggested, placing his hand over hers, feeling the baby kick. They sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, watching the snow fall through the glass windows. "Sebastian," Arabella said eventually, "there's something I want to tell you." "Try." "When we met, you offered something I thought was enough. Companionship, understanding, a path to healing together." She turned to look at him. "But we received so much more than that. We received true love, passion, joy I never believed possible again." "I feel the same way," Sebastian said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "But here's what I really want to say," she continued. "Even if we hadn't found that passion, even if our marriage had been only what we promised each other in that garden, it still would have been enough. Because what we've built together, that deep friendship, that mutual respect, that understanding, that's the foundation of everything else." Sebastian knelt before her, ignoring her protest about his good pants hitting the cold floor. He took her hands in his, kissing each one. "Arabella Thornbury, who is now Arabella Aldrich, Duchess of Blackwood," he said solemnly, "you have not only brought my heart back to life. You have shown me what it means to truly live. Every day with you is a gift I never imagined I deserved." "We deserve it," Arabella said firmly. "After everything we've been through, all the years of pain and loneliness, we deserve this happiness, Sebastian." He reached up and kissed her deeply, one hand on her face, the other carefully resting on her belly where their child was growing. And in that kiss was every promise of their future together. Spring brought not only flowers, but also the birth of her child. Lady Catherine Arabella Aldrich entered the world one March morning, with strong lungs and a stunning head of dark curls. Sebastian cried when he held her for the first time, tears of joy streaming freely down his face. "She's perfect," he whispered in awe. "Just like her mother." Arabella, exhausted but radiant, watched her husband with their baby and felt her heart overflow once more. They named the girl in honor of both Catherine Fairfax and Arabella, a bridge between past and present, pain and healing. In the months that followed, Blackwood Hall was filled with the sounds of a child. Arabella blossomed in her role as a mother, discovering reserves of strength and love she hadn't known she possessed. Sebastian was a devoted father, often found in the nursery late at night, simply watching his daughter sleep. One summer evening, with Catherine now 3 months old, Arabella and Sebastian sat on the terrace, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. The baby slept peacefully in the portable crib beside them, occasionally making small, contented sounds. "Do you remember," Sebastian said softly, "that first day when I arrived at Thornbury Manor? How we were both so careful, so guarded." "I remember," Arabella replied, her hand finding his. "Two strangers with broken hearts, pretending they were made of stone. And now look at us," he gestured to the peaceful scene. "A family. A life together. More happiness than I thought possible." Arabella turned to look at him, the sunset light gilding her profile. "Do you think we'll ever tell Catherine about how we met? About our broken hearts and how we healed them?" "Certainly," Sebastian replied. "We'll tell you how your mother was the bravest woman I ever knew, who chose to love again when it would have been easier to hide. We'll tell you how your father learned that a dead heart can be resurrected by true love. We'll make her a hopeless romantic," Arabella laughed softly. "With stories of how love conquers all." "It doesn't conquer everything," Sebastian corrected thoughtfully. "But it makes everything bearable. And when you find the right person, it makes life extraordinary." Catherine chose that moment to wake, her green eyes so similar to her father's opening to look around in wonder. Arabella picked her up, cradling the baby against her chest. "Hello, little one," she cooed. "Did you wake up to watch the sunset?" Sebastian wrapped his arms around both his wife and daughter and felt a profound peace he had never imagined possible. This was his family. This was his home. And it had all begun with two broken hearts daring to heal together. The years passed in quiet happiness. Catherine grew into a lively and curious girl, followed 2 years later by a brother, Edmund Sebastian, who had his mother's amber eyes and his father's calm temperament. Blackwood Hall was perpetually filled with childish laughter and the joyful bustle of family life. Arabella became known throughout the county for her kindness and charitable works. She established a school for the estate's children and a dispensary for the sick. Her reputation as a generous and wise duchess spread far beyond Kent. Sebastian, for his part, flourished under the love of his family. The once somber and distant man became known for his ready laugh and warm nature. He divided his time between managing his vast estates and being present for his wife and children. Penelope married and had children of her own, often visiting Blackwood Hall with her growing family. Lord Edmund, now advanced in years, spent his summers with them, delighting in his grandchildren. It was during one of these summers, when Catherine was 8 and Edmund 6, that the little girl asked a question Arabella knew would come eventually. "Mommy," Catherine asked as they stood in the rose garden, "how did you know I loved Daddy?" Arabella paused in her pruning, considering her answer carefully. Catherine was precocious for her age, reflective and observant like her father. "It was gradual, dear," she answered honestly. "It wasn't love at first sight, like in fairy tales. It was something that grew slowly, like those roses." "But how did you know for sure?" the girl insisted, her green eyes serious. Arabella sat on the stone bench, pulling Catherine onto her lap even though the girl was getting too big for it. "I knew when I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. You see, Catherine, before I met your father, my heart was so broken. Someone had hurt me deeply, and I thought I would never be able to love again." "How did you hurt your knee when you fell from the tree?" Edmund asked, joining them. He was always around when there were stories being told. "Exactly so," Arabella smiled. "Only it was my heart instead of my knee. And when it finally healed, thanks to your father's love and patience, I knew I could love again without fear." "Did Dad get his heart broken too?" Catherine asked softly. "Yes, little one. He did." Arabella didn't elaborate on Catherine Fairfax, her children were too young to fully understand. "But he and I healed each other. And from that healing came the deepest, truest love." "So you saved each other?" Edmund concluded with the simple logic of a child. "In a way, yes," Arabella agreed. "But more importantly, we help each other save ourselves. Because, my dears, no one can truly save another person. We can only walk alongside them as they find their own way back to the light." Catherine seemed to consider this deeply. "When I grow up, I want to find someone like Dad found you." "And I hope you find it," Arabella said, kissing the top of her daughter's head. "Someone who truly sees you, who values you, who makes your heart feel safe to love." Sebastian, who had been watching from the study window, felt tears prickle his eyes. His wife had become not only the woman he loved, but a wise and loving mother, teaching her children lessons of love and resilience that would serve them throughout their lives. That night, after the children were asleep, Sebastian and Arabella sat together in their room, as they did every night before bed. It was their time, sacred and inviolable, where they talked about the day, shared worries and hopes, and simply enjoyed each other's company. "I overheard your conversation with Catherine today," Sebastian said, brushing Arabella's long hair, a nightly ritual they both enjoyed. "Did you know I was listening?" "I always know where you are," he replied with a smile. "You are the north of my compass." Arabella turned to face him, taking the brush from his hands. "Sebastian Aldrich, after all these years, you still manage to make my heart race with your words." "Good," he said, pulling her into his arms. "Because I intend to continue doing this for many more years." They kissed, the kiss of a couple who knew each other's every curve and shape but never lost that spark of passion and desire. When they broke apart, they were both breathless. "Do you remember," Arabella said, tracing the line of his jaw with gentle fingers, "when I asked you how you knew you loved me? In the winter garden at Thornbury, yes. And you said it was when I challenged you about Kant." She smiled. "I think about that often. How love can come from the most unexpected places, the simplest moments." Sebastian captured her hand, kissing her palm. "Every moment with you has been a gift, Arabella. Even the challenging ones, even the difficult ones. Because we've been through them together." "Together," she echoed, snuggling against him. "That's been the most important word in our lives, hasn't it?" "It was," he agreed. "And always will be." They stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in the comfort of each other's presence, until they eventually moved to the bed, where they fell asleep entwined as they always did. The years continued to pass, bringing their joys and sorrows. Lord Edmund passed away peacefully in his sleep when Catherine was 12, leaving a deeply felt absence, but also a legacy of love and happy memories. The Dowager Duchess followed him 2 years later, having lived long enough to see her grandchildren grow into remarkable young people. Catherine blossomed into a young lady of extraordinary beauty and intelligence. By 17, she already had numerous suitors, but none seemed suitable in her eyes or those of her parents. "She's waiting for her own broken-hearted duke," Arabella joked to Sebastian one night, after Catherine had politely declined yet another suitor. "God help us," Sebastian sighed dramatically. "A daughter with her mother's romanticism and her father's stubbornness." "She'll know when she finds the right person," Arabella assured. "Just like we did." Edmund, at 15, was more pragmatic than his sister. He was interested in the estate's affairs and often accompanied his father on his rounds, absorbing knowledge with the quiet determination that characterized the Aldrichs. One autumn afternoon, almost 20 years after her wedding, Arabella found herself alone in the rose garden. The children were with their guardians, Sebastian was in London on business, and for the first time in a long time, she had a moment truly alone with her thoughts. She walked slowly among the rose bushes, many of them planted by Catherine Fairfax decades before. There was no jealousy in her heart when she thought of Sebastian's first bride. Instead, there was gratitude. Catherine Fairfax had loved Sebastian enough to set him free, to ask him to find happiness again. And from this final generosity, Arabella had received the greatest gift of her life. "Thank you," she whispered to the white roses Catherine had planted. "For loving him enough to let him go. For giving me the chance to love him too. Talking to the flowers, my dear." Arabella turned to find Sebastian standing at the garden entrance, having returned from London earlier than expected. His hair now had silver streaks at the temples, and there were lines around his eyes, but to her, he was as handsome as the day she had met him. "I was thanking Catherine," she admitted without embarrassment. "For giving us each other." Sebastian came closer, wrapping his arms around her. "She would have liked you. In fact, I think she would have liked to know that I've found not just love, but complete happiness." "How was London?" Arabella asked, changing the subject as they began walking together. "Boring without you," he replied. "But productive. I've finalized the contracts for the new textile factory. It will be good for the local economy and provide well-paying jobs." "Always thinking of others," Arabella said proudly. "It's one of the many reasons I love you." Sebastian stopped, turning her to face him. The light of the setting sun gilded her face, making her amber eyes shine like jewels. "Arabella, there's something I want to tell you. Try. I thank you every day for your courage," he said earnestly. "For the courage you had that first day when you decided not to reject me outright. For the courage to answer my letters, to accept my proposal, to risk your heart again. Without that courage, I would still be lost, half alive, existing but not truly living." Tears filled Arabella's eyes. Even after so many years, he could still touch her deeply with his words. "And I thank you for your honesty. For not promising me things you couldn't deliver. For being real with me from the beginning. That made everything possible." They kissed there, among the roses that had witnessed so many moments of their lives, two hearts that were once dead, now beating in perfect synchrony. That night, during family dinner, Catherine made an announcement. "I've met someone," she said, her face flushing delicately. "His name is Lord Henry Ashworth. He is the second son of the Earl of Devonshire." Arabella and Sebastian exchanged glances. "Tell us about him," Arabella encouraged gently. "He's kind," Catherine began, her eyes shining. "And intelligent. He doesn't treat me like a decorative doll, but actually talks to me about ideas, about books, about the world. And when he's with me, I feel like—" She hesitated, searching for the right words. "As if your heart were safe?" Sebastian suggested softly. Catherine looked at her father in surprise. "Exactly. How did you know?" "Because that's how I feel with your mother," he replied, reaching across the table to hold Arabella's hand. "That's how true love should feel." Edmund rolled his eyes dramatically. "You're both incredibly sentimental. But I suppose it's better than the other way around." "One day, young lady," Arabella said with a smile, "you will find someone who makes your heart feel things you never imagined possible. And then you will understand. If it means I have to get as cheesy as you, I'd rather stay single," Edmund declared, making everyone laugh. But Arabella saw the curiosity in his eyes, the budding desire to understand what her parents had. And she knew that when his time came, he, too, would find his way to love. Lord Henry Ashworth proved to be exactly what Catherine had described. When Sebastian and Arabella formally met him, they immediately saw the genuine affection in his eyes as he looked at their daughter. And more importantly, they saw how Catherine blossomed in his presence. "He reminds me of you," Arabella said to Sebastian after Henry had left following his first formal visit to Blackwood Hall. "There's the same honesty, the same depth. As long as he treats our daughter with the love and respect she deserves," Sebastian said, his protective fatherly voice emerging, "he has my blessing." The engagement was announced in the fall of that year, and the wedding was planned for the following spring. Arabella found herself involved in wedding preparations for the second time in